Yes, a Princeton University professor is claiming that carbon is just like the Jews under Hitler. Watch. Watch.
I certainly
Are
have
you
no confidence in them.
You know, I'm immediately going to get mail that you're funded by Exxon or by the hydrocarbon industry. Do you have any vested interests, any conflicts that cause you to have these views and that are, many people would say, anti-science or at least against the scientific community?
Well, you know, I consider myself part of the scientific community. You know,
You must get a lot of flack, don't you, Professor? Don't you get a lot of flack?
Yeah, of course. But so what? You know, that's been true forever. You know, when Galileo had his tiff with the church, he got a lot of flack too.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Professor, I have some issues with all of this, obviously, because you don't believe in climate change at all. You made a comment.
Just a minute. I believe in climate change.
Sir,
Shut up.
Sir, I'm open to all ideas. You made a comment back in 2009 comparing climate change to the Holocaust. And my question is, are you suggesting, when you made that comment, that climatologists and climate scientists are the equivalent of Hitler and Nazis? I mean, that's what it seems like you were trying to say.
Yeah, you know, I get called a denier, and anyone who objects to all of the hype gets called a denier. That's supposed to make me a Holocaust denier. You know, I'm getting tired of that. And the comment I made was the demonization of carbon dioxide is just like the demonization of the poor Jews under Hitler.
This guy proves that just because you're a professor doesn't mean you're smart. Now, he calls himself, and this is hilarious, he called himself a part of the scientific community. Now, technically, I guess he is. He's a physicist, right? He has a PhD in physics from Princeton, which is amazing to me. But as he pointed out during a Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works, quote, "I am not a climatologist." Well, that much is sure. Despite not being a climatologist, he did, however, publish one paper on climate change. Strangely enough, it wasn't peer-reviewed. I wonder why. Also, comparing carbon to the Holocaust? Seriously. What the fuck? But wait, in case you're wondering, just like this CNBC anchor was, if Happer had any financial motives. Well, don't worry. You can rest easy.
How much money did you take from Exxon over the years in the aughts?
I haven't taken a dime from Exxon. I have not taken one dime from Exxon.
The foundation that you worked for didn't take money from Exxon? You weren't paid by them?
I don't work for the foundation. I'm a trustee of the Marshall Institute, and I'm proud of it.
All right, Professor, we appreciate your time today.
He didn't take a dime from Exxon. He's just a trustee of one of the more well-known front groups that show for the fossil fuel industry. And actually, he's not a trustee, as far as we know. He's on the board of directors for the George C. Marshall Institute, which has taken hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe more, from ExxonMobil. Now, as far as I know, Happer is on the board of directors, at least according to SourceWatch, as far as back as 2009, where the records end. So he might no longer be in that position, and he might be correct. But to say that he didn't get any sort of payout from being in that position, come on. What do you take us for? Anyway, I'm going to go to the panel. What do you guys think about this guy? Let's start with you, Dan.
Sure. So, okay, where do we start with this kind of stuff? First of all, I mean, I think it's obvious that nobody agrees with this guy. This guy's very extreme. When he went to testify, Barbara Boxer and him got into kind of an infamous little back and forth, because he's suggesting, by the way, for his full thesis that didn't really get on the show, is that he thinks more carbon in the atmosphere would actually be really beneficial to Earth, because when the dinosaurs were around, everything seemed fine, like the Earth's climate was okay. Going even farther back, he said, like, there were crocodiles or alligators in Mississippi and blah blah blah, and like it was like, okay, great. And your point being, the idea, of course, is when humans, us folk, enter the actual planet, there are some issues with this problem that we're having is climate change. But of course, you're always going to have this, sort of situation where you're going to have a guy, and I call these the circle smirk segments. that are really popular in media right now because they're great for clickbait. They raise your website clicks up. They do well on social media, and it's mostly because of folks like us, because we love to take out the piñata and like this guy and have a couple rounds on him. But the great thing about this panel is they've had him on before. Already this year. They had him on back in January, I think it was. And they did the same thing, and it was the same kind of the back and forth that you had today, which, he didn't go as crazy and double down, and this time there was a little bit more opposition, because I think the first time they had him on, they didn't realize how crazy he was. So it's like, bring him back so the most progressive guy on our CNBC panel can have a swing at him. It'll do great, and it does. But yeah, the BBC recently banned these climate change deniers. I want the CBC here in Canada to do it as well. Of course, those are publicly funded stations, so we have a little bit more say than you would ever be able to do anything with a private broadcaster like CNBC. But this is why. It's just insanity.
All right, Jordan, let's go to you.
I want to address something you kind of brought up. It's hard to believe this guy has a degree in physics, and he's at, where is he again? Is it Princeton that he's?
Princeton,
yeah, okay. Fairly reputable.
Princeton should be ashamed.
Princeton should be ashamed. Well, maybe they should. I don't know. I don't want to say a school should be ashamed for somebody's political ideology. That seems kind of un-American. But I do want to point out, okay, so there is the obvious caveat where this guy, works for a think tank for these, industries he's promoting. But we do also have to point out, there is no correlation between intelligence and cognitive dissonance. That the most intelligent people in the world who day in, day out, professionally use the scientific are completely capable of ignoring it, when something doesn't fit a particular belief. And neuroscience is, telling us more and more. We don't necessarily know why that is, but we're learning as time goes on. So I'm not surprised he's maybe I wouldn't have guessed he had a degree or a PhD in physics or whatever, but it's not unreasonable to think that he does, even without the monetary involvement. This point about Galileo, because I hate false equivalency as much as anyone on earth. Okay, so Galileo was caught a lot of flack because he was, kind of helping pioneer this scientific method and coming up with conclusions that didn't fit what was previously believed to be true, and the conclusions drawn by people who hadn't really used the scientific method. So it's not the same as into an established system of climate change and greenhouse gases that's been established not a priori but by the scientific method, and saying I'm just like Galileo. Now the guy has a point. The scientific community, scientists are still people, and they're still flawed human beings. They can sometimes be a little hostile to new ideas, but over time, if the data is there, those new ideas win out. That's why he's being continually ridiculed and laughed at, because his data is not winning out because his data is found to be flawed, wanting, or the data is right, but he's jumping to conclusions that the data doesn't support. And that is a far cry from what Galileo went through.
All right, Sean.
I just want to say that this guy actually makes some amazing points. The first one is that when people call anti-global warming people climate deniers, they are trying to invoke that this is like the only true thing he said in his entire statement. They are trying to invoke Holocaust deniers when they say that, because that's
they're not. That's ridiculous.
That is the connotation that deniers has.
No, absolutely not. They're denying it because they don't believe in it. They're denying reality.
Yeah,
they're not
called deniers because they're denying it.
Right, exactly.
I've never made that jump. That's ridiculous.
All right, it's like I said, when you call them anti-science, that's also truthful because they are denying climate change, right? They are technically deniers. That's totally true. But when you call them anti-science people or whatever, or anti-logical people, that doesn't have the same connotation as deniers. If you deny that, then ironically, you guys are denying reality. Like, there's a reason that that talking point is put out there. Like, I'm just saying.
So are you trying to associate us with Holocaust deniers?
No, I'm just saying. Like, I just said, ironically,
whenever you go scan your credit card and you're out of money and it says transaction denied, is that credit card machine calling you a Holocaust denier?
But when you use the word denier, like that connotation in our culture
of a credit card machine being anti-Semitic.
First of all, it said denied, and I'm not accusing anybody of anti-Semitism. I'm just saying that's his only point. When you use that denier, global warming denier, that it has that connotation for a lot of people. Whether you accept that or not is fine. It's just amusing that you guys are denying that, and kind of hilarious. And I didn't expect that. If you're like a skeptic, right? And I'm talking like, because all scientists are supposed to be skeptics. And by the way, this is how climate change became such a powerful theory. If you're a skeptic and you have a hypothesis and you test it, and it either confirms or denies a scientific theory, then that is great. That is the process and all that. This guy is not somebody who's doing experiments. This guy is not somebody who's actually participating in the scientific process. He's getting money through his foundations, through various groups. Some of them, or most of them, just happen to be fossil fuel companies. And he goes on TV and promotes his ideas. Like, he's not engaged in the scientific process. Like, if he was doing that, then that would be different. He's like, because there was an MIT scientist who didn't believe in climate change, and he did like experiments, and he ended up making it stronger. So like that is part of the scientific process, but this guy is not participating in it, and his demagoguery with the with invoking the Holocaust for carbon is silly. But that one thing about the deniers is still true.
Okay. I do want to talk about something that just sort of is really interesting that I think the progressive folks that do watch the show don't give enough flack to. And it's a really big problem, especially when it comes with the economy. We do not have enough progressive voices on the economic beat, in whether it's reporters or whether it's, and I don't just mean progressive voices, I mean we don't have anybody that's not completely doing the bidding of Wall Street on the economic beat, outside of people like Matt Taibbi who are on the outskirts. But these folks on CNBC are more right-wing than Fox News. There's actually been panels and polls done and studies done on media concentration, and then in this same idea that when this happens, you end up with less voices, and the voices we do have in the States, you have that situation happening, which is CNBC is worse than Fox News on a lot of these issues in terms of bias. And this is a really great example of this. So as I said, they brought him back once, and now they brought him back again, and this happened. But what I really want to point out, this show's called Squawk Box, and it's by a guy named, the host is Joe Kernan. He's one of the 3 hosts, but I just want to bring this up to the panel. This Joe Kernan guy co-wrote a book with his daughter, who's in grade 7. I think she's in grade 8 now. It says, "Your Teacher Said What" is the title of the book. Of course, the amazing subtitle is "Defending Our Kids from the Liberal Assault on Capitalism." And it's all about how teachers are indoctrinating youth. And during a book interview, the host of this, he's, by the way, the guy in the clip that's like leading the witness. He's like, isn't it crazy how you're like outlawed? And isn't it crazy how he loves his points, because this guy is a complete climate, not just denier, but he's a complete and outright liar on a lot of these issues. But just to drive the point home, I want you to read his solution from 2008, what he got out of it. He was asked, so you feel after the financial crisis, people were saying it is business that was to blame, but in your view, who is to blame? Government. The artificially low interest rates on the Fed, the unbridled growth of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the well-intentioned emphasis the government put on home ownership. It's the American dream to own your own home. We got caught up in that. But business, okay, they definitely had a part of it. Everyone has some culpability. But I think right now in the popular media, we've decided it's Wall Street's fault. Yeah, we kind of did bring out the 20 different graphs that show us income inequality problems and that show us the 1% growth versus the rest of the country. And so, I mean, it's that guy running that panel, and that's the kind of stuff that guy wants to see and bring into your homes all the time. He wants the climate denier, and I almost feel bad for that professor because he's getting up there in age. I'm not quite sure, whether he really wants to be a cable news pundit. He likes to believe in his views, and he has the right, as Sean said, to do that. But yeah, like this guy is exploiting. I have a professor from Princeton on. You could see him salivating, trying to lead him on, like, what about this? You also believe this. And if you see the first clip he did back in January, the entire interview goes like that. Where he's like, well, you also know this, because I read in an article you said this. So, yeah, he got set up, and he got, batted around on social media this week, and I'm not sure it was entirely his fault. It's his fault for saying something so asinine, but yeah, it's clickbait segments that are like this happening more and more, and we don't have an equal voice on the economic beat. It's these radicals.
Yeah. What's funny is this guy, he's, just like you said, I brought on a professor from Princeton who doesn't believe in climate change, as if that lends him a certain air of credibility on the subject. The guy isn't even a climate scientist, and they don't point that out. I had to go through and search through other places just to, point out that he acknowledges that fact that he's not a climate scientist, but he still tries to present himself, or at least people try to present him as an authoritative voice on climate change simply because he's a professor from Princeton. And by the way, he's got a PhD in physics, not climate science, two completely different things. But he attempts to intertwine it by saying, but I studied like gases and stuff, so I know how it works. No, you don't.
That's a problem across all media, though. It really is. Like, it's not like left or right. It's like when it comes to climate change, it's like, are you a biology teacher? Good, come on the panel. Like it's like, have you ever watched an episode of Beekman's World? Good, come on. And so that's sort of the problem that we have in general. I mean, like, I'm one of those few people who's against the rapid use of Bill Nye in these segments too. Like, I just think it's a serious issue, and climatologists, please.
I'm right there with you, Dan. I'm glad to hear someone else say that.
Oh, we do forget that he's only he's an engineer and not a climate scientist.
That's the thing about the media, is they like to bring on people who can talk, but that don't know anything. Like Bill Nye, or aren't experts in the subject. Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse Tyson are both incredibly smart guys, but they bring them on to talk about climate issues when they're not a climate scientist, and then you always have that moment where they say, you're not a climate scientist either. Meanwhile, these two guys are scientists going off scientific papers, and you're, you're just a guy who's like a lobbyist or whatever, who speaks well, and like you're not even in the scientific realm. So like that's a trick that the media always does. They don't bring actual experts on there. Like bring a meteorologist on. Like just like he studies the weather. That's kind of close, not really at all. I know commenters, calm down. But like bring somebody who's like close in discipline or something. Like they just bring anybody who they could say doctor, and PhD is what I mean by doctor, and they just bring them on and present them as an expert, and that's the great illusion of American television.